Hi, I'm Jordan Allers, and I'm here downtown Asheville at Momentum Gallery, where we're opening our latest exhibition virtually. And it's a three-person show called Emergence, with works by Alysia Fischer, Vicki Grant, and Ivy Jacobson. We're here today with Alysia Fischer, one of the artists in our three-person exhibition that we're opening. And I'm certainly grateful to Alysia for joining us today and making yourself available to share a little bit more about where her work comes from and how she got into this in the first place. So thank you so much for coming, Alysia.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So I know that you have a doctorate. And can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into all of this?
Well, I started out as an art major and a glass artist working with Stephen Ralph Powell down in Kentucky. And I ended up getting into ancient glass. And so I was continuing to do both art and archaeology for a long time. I did archaeology in Israel and still work on the glass from a couple of excavations, getting those published. And so I have a PhD in anthropology, but one of the things I really focused on was consumption and what happens to the things that we use and then discard. And so when I worked on a Master's of Fine Arts, I really focused on that. And so I looked around to see what was in my sort of sphere that could be utilized and not put into the landfill. And the thing that came up for me initially was bicycle tires, because they got used a lot. I really want to support cycling and that people being active in that way, and our local bike shop was more than happy to give me their trash so they didn't have to throw it away. And so that's how I started. And then I moved up into much larger inner tubes, but also reused. And so some of these pieces that I have here are made from inner tubes that are, before they're blown up, so before they're inflated, are 6 or 7 feet in diameter. So that's some of what you'll see when we go around and look at the show. And it is over 9 feet tall. And one of the things about using inner tubes is that they're not flat. And because they aren't, because they're shaped like a donut, when you cut it open, it ends up draping like fabric. And so from the side, you can see that the piece has these lovely ripples in it that are part of really, I guess, the natural process of an unnatural material.
And you're incising and stitching in a lot of the works. Is there a significance? I notice a lot of the pieces have kind of a botanical imagery, either leaves or petals, but they definitely have a feeling that references nature, even though they're made from very much a man-made material.
Yes, sort of the opposite of a natural material. And what happened, I mean, I think my mother might argue that because she's a horticulturalist, that this is just in my DNA and I can't help but do it. But part of it had to do with, and if you look at these pieces, sort of the pattern that I created in my head and the patterns that I follow, and it naturally for me evolved into these sort of floral pieces. One of the things that really excites me about the work is the shadows. And when it's lit well, which you can definitely see here at Momentum, you'll see multiple layers because of the different angles of the lights they have. So there's not just one shadow, there's 3 or 4. And the way that they work in conjunction with the piece itself is what's really exciting to me. I think part of it is actually my background in glass, which is maybe a surprise because glass is a transparent or translucent material, and this is such an opaque material. But when you put those shadows in with it, you get to have that sort of layering and that translucency, not from the piece itself, but from the shadows. And so, to me, they really come alive at the point that they're lit.
Well, it just emphasizes all the dimensionality of the work, because there is, they have some play in the material. They're not rigid. They're flexible, and so So some areas are closer to the wall and some lift off more, and so the shadow play is affected by that depth.
So a lot of my work is about the negative spaces, what I cut away, and then what has shadows as a result. And this piece is called Aperture, and so it is about a really big negative space in the center. Is just as important to me as the solid piece around the edge, which isn't really solid because I've cut it into a floral lace. One of my favorite things about this piece is the shadows, and you can look along the bottom and you can see how crisp those are, and how in some ways to me it's more exciting even than the piece itself, is this sort of elongated shadow that gets formed from it.
You do other things besides artwork too. You make wearable work with the same material, and functional pieces like handbags and things too.
Yeah, I've tried to think of all the different ways that I could use this material, because one of the things about rubber, and so both inner tubes and tires, is that they go into a landfill and they are not a positive thing in there. They're not going to break down, and if they do, they break down into things that we don't really want to have in our water or anything like that. And so for me, this is actually one of the highest uses of this, is to not have it go into that landfill, to get it diverted and use it as something that it's not a virgin material. It's gotten multiple uses out of it, and I like seeing it be something. I don't want to just say decorative, because a lot of my things are useful as well.
But there's a beauty to them that comes out of something that, a tire in and of itself is not exactly what I think of when the word beauty pops into my mind. It's beautiful in its own way, I suppose. But.
And they have wear on them too. If you get up close and you look at them, sometimes you can see the grit. And other thing is that as much as I have washed as much as I can off of it, some of it, you can see what, as archaeologists would call use life. You can see things from the use life. You can say, oh yes, this was definitely used, and somebody was riding in this kind of terrain or something like that.
Excellent.
So this piece is named Burgeoning, and it's all cut out of one piece of inner tube. And I was able to introduce color before I started cutting it. And so by doing so, if you come and see the piece up close, one of the things you're gonna see is where I was able to cut through, it has these black outlines. If I had done it afterwards, if I had painted it after I had cut it, you wouldn't get that kind of dimension that you get this way.
You also make objects. We have a few of them here in the show, and they definitely have a botanical feel. These particular ones do. If you don't mind, I'm going to pick this one up. And I like the color of this so much. But this is a great example of how you've joined what you do with rubber with one of your first loves and pursuits in the arts, with glass. Now, you want to tell us a little bit about where these pieces come from and what kind of leads you to create these forms?
Okay. One of the things that I was really fortunate as an undergraduate, and then right when I was finishing my PhD, so both times, I was working for Stephen Powell. And one of the great things about working for him, a very well-known, world-renowned glass artist, is that he had these teams of people who worked for him. And so we have this extended family of people who worked for him over the years. There are about 50 of us. And so one of them has a gallery, Flame Run Gallery. It's a hot glass shop in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I went and did a residency in January, where I was able to work with them and with the pieces that they have been creating and trying to marry it with the rubber that I had done. Because I had not blown glass. I actually did get in the hot shop a little bit when I was there, but I hadn't blown glass since, I think 2002. So it had been a really long time because I've been really focusing on the ancient glass side of things. And so I tried working with them before, and one of them always sort of took over. Like, it was a glass piece with rubber. or a rubber piece with glass. And I feel like finally with this new set of objects that I was able to make during that residency,
find that balance.
This is a glass and rubber piece for the first time. And they have a lot of movement to them. That one's called Slither. And then we also have this one, Slipper, because it's supposed to be slipping out. So this idea of movement. And again, this is with bicycle tires. This is with the pieces cut out of some of these larger pieces. So this would be a different kind of inner tube. This is bicycle inner tube that's in hand stitched together. So I really like the idea of having this industrial material that is getting this sort of handwork attention devoted to it.
I like the combination of, obviously the color that you're able to bring in with the glass is quite nice, but also it's such a different material with being translucent, whereas the rubber is clearly opaque and very flat. But you've got this very interesting kind of seed pod, kind of a blooming bud, if you will, or something with this too. So I can see Slipper out is, very much responding to the theme kind of in the show, emergence, which is certainly taken on new meaning in the midst of current circumstances. Well, I talked about how a lot of the cutout patterns, I see botanical imagery and flower petals and leaves, and they just feel like a very organic sort of imagery, even though it's a very much an abstracted sort of pattern that's created. But they also really have a lace-like quality, and I find that interesting because they're out of rubber. That you're able to achieve this kind of femininity and even kind of a nod to women's work in something that is used in motorsports and construction and various things like that seems like a real interesting juxtaposition, I guess.
I think one of the things that people would be surprised about is actually if you touch it, it actually is a very soft material. And so we have this idea in our head that it's this very industrial, hard-edged material, but it's actually quite soft. And when I'm working with it, one of the things that happens is I'll have it on my lap and I'll be cutting on it or sewing it, and it actually warms up and it reaches body temperature. So it is really a very sort of supple material. And I think that really plays well into the things I try to get it to do. I like to have it drape like fabric, and you'll see that in some of the pieces, how it can drape and be this sort of soft, gentle material that is unexpected. Sometimes people see my work and they don't know what the material is, and they're surprised to find out, especially because they haven't seen inner tubes maybe at this scale. And so that can be a surprise as well.
We've got a really nice collection of Alysia's work in the show with probably about somewhere around 20 pieces in different sizes and different price points. There's works for the wall, there's freestanding objects, there are pieces that are cut and draped, there are pieces that are stitched and much flatter. If you'd like more information on any of the pieces, you can find it on our website under each individual artist.